I am biased and I believe that there is one particular flower that is super duper awesome for beginners. And so today we're going to paint a sunflower. Are you ready to paint with me today? Oh, I hope so. All right, let's go. Today we are going to be using Arches 300 GSM rough finish. I love this paper and it's a square format. So if you're painting along with me, just chop your paper into a square if you really want to be extra, or just use a rectangle and do what you do. Also using one of my favorite handmade watercolor palettes. This is Case for Making. They're a little more opaque. I adore this palette, so let's get into it. My dad was in the Navy and he would always use this phrase, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, which I know seems a little bit aggressive, but the reality of it is true. To find your joy, to be in your joy, and to be able to easily access your joy reliably, you want to keep things simple. So today we're going to be using one brush for the most part, maybe two others here and there, but you're going to be blown away by the fact that we're using primarily the 3/4 inch wash brush. If you don't have one of these, just use a big old round brush and you'll be just fine. I am going to bring in the cat's tongue and the star of them all, the 1/4 inch dagger. Let's get into it. Diving right in, I start with the center. Friends, this is a sunflower. So what is iconic about a sunflower center? It's that big, bold, round-ish center that is filled with texture and actually filled with a lot of interesting color, just more muted color. So I'm bringing in whatever's on my palette, whatever I feel the instinct to grab on my brush. So browns, purples, blues, even a little bit of terracotta there. I'm not being super picky about rinsing my brush perfectly in between each color. Yes, I'm dipping from color to color in my palette. You can clearly see that I'm pretty messy when it comes to my palettes, but it serves me well. Some reds. The idea is to create a center that has a lot of strokes, a lot of texture, and a good amount of color going on, and let them just blend into one another. So when we start, it's wet on dry paper, but immediately as we get into it, it turns into wet on wet or wet on damp. It's important at this stage for you to keep the outer edge of your sunflower center really uneven. So lots of scratchy marks. You don't want like a nice, even, round shape. You want lots of interest on that silhouette. All right, I'm going in with my 1/4 inch dagger, but friends, you could easily stay with the flat wash brush. So do you. And I'm pressing and curving my stroke. And as I curve and press, I'm dragging it upwards. And I'm doing that twice to create essentially a really elongated, curious looking teardrop shape. Okay, so let's repeat that again. We're pressing, curving, dragging, and lifting, and doing that on the other side, mirroring that brush stroke to get this beautiful, creative teardrop outline. And then I'm taking either another color or just clean water and filling in that shape. And I'm repeating that over and over again around the center that I just painted. Now, be mindful that yes, you're going to run into the center of your sunflower a little bit, and you're going to see some explosions of color. And that's a beautiful thing. Just don't be super aggressive when your brush of yellow hits the brown center. If you use a lot of pressure at that point, you're going to get a lot more explosion and probably more of a muddy look than you're really after. As you go around the center, keep in mind you want each of these yellow petals to have their own personality. So how can we do that? We can fill the petals with curious shades of yellow, even tipping into the orange area, right? We can also make sure that each of these petals, which are essentially a version of a teardrop, have all different vibes to them. So some of them are going to curve upwards at the end. So maybe drag a little bit longer and take longer to do that gradual lift until you come to the point at the end. Some are going to be wider, some are going to be shorter. Keep each petal interesting. Give them their own personality. Now, just a little tip. If at this point you feel like your brown center's running into your yellow way too much, you can take your brush, any of the brushes, a bigger one's going to work better, rinse it, dry it, and then you want to scoop towards the center, the brown center with your brush, and basically kind of push that brown color back towards the center, but only do it once, rinse, dry off your brush, and then repeat that. So this entire painting is being done in one sitting, and that means everything's gonna kind of be damp or wet at any point in the process. And as long as you anticipate that, you're gonna be okay with it. So we're gonna get right into it with some green. And this is the point where you start to think about your background a little bit. So I wanna make sure that my green leaves are different looking than the petals. So I'm adding a little bit of a jagged edge here with my flat wash brush. And I wanna make sure that they are different as well in terms of scale. So they're a little bit larger for the most part. Use different shades of green, keep it exciting, mix on your page. And if you're wondering what I mean by mix on the page, watch this video for sure. But basically, don't feel like you always have to mix on a palette. See what I'm doing here? I'm literally adding the veins of the leaf right into a damp underpainting of green. And because the underpainting of the leaf is damp, when I add those blue veins, things are starting to blend and mix naturally on the page. So just a heads up, we're going to be filling this entire paper surface with color. And that's what I love about this easy beginner flower. And that's why it's so successful, because when you start really adding in the background colors, everything else starts to pop and it's extremely satisfying. So I'm going back into the center here. Now that things are a little drier, they're still damp, but I'm adding some contrast with some really, really strong, like dark blue or an indigo if you have it. So basically just take the darkest blue you have, maybe add the darkest green you have, a little bit of brown, you'll be golden. And then I'm adding some reds. You choose your favorite red and just add that additional layer of zingy color and let that dry. Moving into the background, friends, I am using the 3/4 inch wash brush, and I am just adding some blue right along the edge where the white of the paper meets the yellow of the flower. And I'm going right around the edge and then getting water on my brush to move that color around and blend it out and fill in those background shapes. Now, friends, if your yellow isn't dry at this point, it's fine. Just make sure you have a little bit of a white margin between your blue and your damp or wet yellow petals. So what do I mean by that? Just leave a little bit of space between the mark that you're making with a brush loaded with blue paint and the wet petal. Now, if you are an uber beginner and that just makes you super nervous, I don't blame you. Just take a hair dryer to everything before you start the blue background and you will be golden and you will have no worries. I'm continuing around this background, friends, but the point is to keep a wet edge, which basically means don't wait too long before you continue on your background journey. Because if you do, that edge that you just painted could dry to a very hard edge that would be difficult to re-wet and soften and get blending into the rest of the background. So work quickly. When you start this background, create an environment where you're not going to have any interruptions. I mean, I know life happens, but just make sure that you've got yourself a good 5 minutes to make this background happen so you're not interrupted. Things to think about. Keep bringing in different blues. It just creates a really exciting background. You've got a lot of room to fill here, so there's no need to fill it with all the same blue. I'm bringing in more of a cerulean. These are all custom handmade colors, so I'm just giving you general ideas of the types of blues. We've got like a French ultramarine. We've got an indigo I've been bringing in. I've even got like a kind of a periwinkle. So get into it with your color. This is for a time for you to experiment and have a lot of fun filling this background. Friends, I hope you are having as much fun as I am. I never get tired of painting this sunflower. So if you're feeling good, you're feeling exhilarated, and you're having a little bit of a wow moment, would you please hit me up in the comments below? I want to hear what you're loving most at this point and what has you most surprised. So let me know. I can't wait to hear what you have to tell me. And while you're at it, why don't you give this video a boop, which is a like, so everyone else on YouTube can get in on this sunflower awesomeness. Okay, here we are, friends. Now, everything at this point is pretty dry. This is a great time to just take a look, evaluate, see what you're doing, see how you're feeling. And most importantly, take a breath. Make sure that you're breathing. This is supposed to be fun. Now I've got my cat's tongue. I'm gonna load up the cat's tongue with a really dark indigo, and I'm gonna go into the center of the flower, press and lift, changing the angle of my brush, the angle of my hand, press and lift. I want these little marks to kind of radiate around the very center of this dark sunflower center. So to do that, you can either turn your page or you can adjust the angle of your hand and therefore your brush. This is a really fun way to add texture. Is this super realism? No, but you know me, friends, that's not what we're here for. I want to create an exciting and recognizable version of a sunflower. That's it. I'm adding a little green at the center over top of that dark color. So the green doesn't really pop, but it adds a little bit of something, something. Now, if you want that green to pop at the center, yes, you're painting over top dark color. So add a little bit of fluorescent. Remember, friends, this handmade watercolor palette is a lot more opaque than traditional watercolors. So not quite as opaque as gouache, but just something to keep in mind when you're wondering why I'm getting certain effects that I'm getting. That is why. All right, friends, grabbing the 1/4 inch dagger, I'm going around with a medium kind of slightly dusty, muddy looking orange, and I'm adding in these short, quick strokes of petals. These are like those, you know, sunflowers have those little curly, cool petals that kind of weave in and around the big, bold petals. Well, I'm adding those in with this orange color, and I'm basically using a simple press, drag, and lift. It's a shorter drag, so not a long drag. I don't want long petals. I want kind of shorter petals in most places. Now, once I have those in, you can then extend some of those petals as you feel necessary to become part of the bigger petals. I did that in 2 places. It just felt right. Grabbing my liner brush, this is one of my favorite brushes. I'm using that same medium orange, dragging from the center where the petal meets the dark center, these elongated, wispy, elegant lines that follow the contour of the petal. Lovely, lovely, and finish. This is such an exciting way to add a skosh of realism to your otherwise expressive, impressionistic painting. I adore this brush. I can't get enough of it. You might want to adjust your color. I added a little bit more red to the orange right here at this point because I was going over top of a more orange petal and I wanted those thin wispy lines to pop. Don't be afraid to go outside of the lines of the petals you've painted earlier on in the painting. You can reestablish some shape and some movement by simply going a little bit outside of the lines you've already painted or outside of the shapes you've already established. You see, I did that in the upper right-hand corner there by that green leaf, and wow, did it add some dynamic movement to the painting. So just keep going around with your liner brush. Now, I am not going to treat each petal the same way. I'm not going to add this linear detail in the same way everywhere, because if I did, it would just feel boring and my eye would get bored. Whoever's looking at this painting eventually, their eyes will get bored, and we don't want that. At any point where you feel like too much is going on with the linear detail and you want to tone it down, load up your bigger brush. I'm using the 3/4 inch wash brush, and with either a little bit of yellow or clean water, just go over top with light touch in the direction and the shape of the original petal and just blendy blend, smooth things out. It's a great technique when you've gone a little overboard with detail and things are still damp. I'm going into the center again with that dark indigo, and I am adding some detail with the liner brush now, just to further accent that soft green overlay that I added recently. I love that, and I kind of want that to tuck back in and kind of disappear into the distance of the flower center a little bit. So I'm adding some touches around it with the dark indigo. Now, of course, I'm going into these gorgeous leaves. I want to further accentuate those veins that I added with the wet on damp technique earlier. I'm using an indigo. I'm letting it kind of drag out. I'm letting the color run out. Remember, you don't always have to have a full brush of color. Let that color run out. It's just gonna add interest and more texture to your painting. Look at that leaf at the bottom left. So good. Oh, this brush, friends, I adore it. If you don't have a liner brush, but you have a really good round brush that comes to a glorious little point, then just use that brush to create these linear details. Just be very mindful of the pressure on your brush. You want to just hover right above the page to get those thin, thin lines. Admittedly, the liner brush makes it a lot easier. Now, for some fun interest in the background, now that the background's dry, I'm literally going into the background with that indigo blue. If you don't have an actual indigo, just take your darkest blue, mix it with a little bit of black or a little bit of brown or even a little bit of green and red, and load up that liner brush, and you're going to just sketch some simple linear detail leaves. And if you want to know more about creating these fun little filler flowers and greenery bits, I want you to watch this video. It is such a great way to develop some new skills for filler flowers. You're gonna love it. Continuing on here, just think of almost think of what would a cartoon leaf look like. That's what you're sketching out. A simple teardrop, a little line down the center for your vein, your main vein, and then a few coming out from the edge, following the contour of your simple teardrop. Now at this point, friends, it's all about taking a beat, taking a moment, and looking at what you've created and deciding, did I put too much detail there? Do I want to blend it out with a clean brush a little bit? Do I want to add more linear detail here, like I am at the bottom left in that big old petal? So evaluate. Always take a moment or two, even during a short painting session where maybe you're only painting for 15 minutes. It's imperative to take moments during that time to evaluate, analyze, and most importantly, breathe. How are we feeling, friends? Because I don't know about you, but I am, like I said, I don't get tired of this sunflower, friends. I could paint her over and over again for the rest of my life, and I probably will, because she makes me so happy. Now let's think about down the road. What could you do next with this? You could paint on a 9x12. This is like a 10x10. You could take this to a 9x12, add a little buds, add some more sketching with that liner brush in the background. Think of what you could do next, because the thing is, if you're feeling good about this painting, I want you to take that good feeling and I want you to run with it. And what I mean is I want you to run to your next sheet of paper that's waiting for you to fill. Now, something I love to do with this flower is, now my palette has a very soft icy blue that's very opaque, and I am loading my liner brush with that and just adding little touches here and there, little white sparkles. Even though it's not white, it looks white, to the center of this very dark sunflower. Look at that. So if you don't have this same icy blue, I want you to use a white gouache. You could use a white gel pen. You could use white acrylic watered down, thinned down to a nice syrupy texture. You could use anything. But the point is, adding that little skosh of sparkle at this point is so incredibly satisfying. And it wouldn't be me if I didn't put in a random punch of colors. So with my liner brush right now, I'm adding even more linear details in this fluorescent-ish red tone, and I'm so happy I did. Last here, I'm going in with a little violet into the background. Now, I know I sketched in the background earlier with an indigo. Well, why not change it up a little bit? So a little bit of violet up here in the upper left-hand corner. Now, you may be loving things as they are at this point, but if you are still feeling like you could push things a little further, do what I'm doing here. I grabbed a little bit of fluorescent yellow on my dagger brush, and I'm just doing a little bit of filling in on some of these leaves with that fluorescent yellow. Look at that. Now, you could easily leave some of your sketched leaves in the background blue untouched. You don't have to color them in, fill them in. But you could also do a mix. You could have some that are filled in with this fun accent color, and then you could have some that are just sketches, just linear. Look at that. Oh, I can't handle it. I can't handle how excited I am. Are you excited? Give this video a boop if you are feeling just like I am right now, and I hope you are. All right, friends, let me know in comments that you're gonna try this. I wanna hear when you're gonna try it, and I wanna hear what you're most excited about trying this super dupes easy sunflower that is guaranteed to get you a little high on life. All right, friends, I hope you've had such a fun time. I know I have. If you love this kind of bold flower painting, I want you to watch this video next. And as I always say, friends, until next time, happy painting.